Ant-Man and Giant Man, Volume 2. Finally, this is the epic collection, Ant-Man No More. So Volume 2 there, 1964 to 1979. It's about 480 odd pages. Got some small amount of bonus material at the back, some quite interesting one, but lots of different, unusual, quirky stories. And also, it finishes off the storylines that were in the Tales To Astonish from this one. So you've got Ant-Man and Giant Man. Again, I'm not certain why I didn't include the Wasp. She turns up in lots of the stories. So, but this finally finishes it off. Now, the stories are not great, and this is probably the reason why they eventually cancelled it. I mean, he just never had the greatest of villains. He's even ended up having stories here, Giant Man versus the Wonderful Wasp. And that was it. It was like gangster stories. There was also Egghead, Human Top, one of those characters that never really, and even Atomer or Atuma turned up. Very odd, but different styles of artwork as well. It's sort of quite varied. And also some artists that I've never, and writers, this one, I expect someone will work, Leon Lazarus, and obviously Carl Burgos. Very unusual mix there, but Atuma, not one of my favourite characters. But this one as well with his cat, just very strange. Bob Powell, really, very unusual bit of artwork there. But it was inked by Don Heck, my old favourite Don Heck. Also, costume change as well. Maybe not the world's greatest of costumes, but that's what they did. They obviously were trying lots of different things. But it would have been great if they'd had some maybe sort of load of villains, like smaller villains. Maybe they'd gone for maybe a fantasy world where he would shrink into the sort of like the way they obviously the film. That would be brilliant. I'm not certain why they didn't do that sort of thing. Instead, they had the Human Top. Human Top turned up a few times in these Giant Man stories. He was not the world's greatest. He even then ended up being Whirlwind and was still pretty useless. But this one, this was probably the oddest one. This was after Tales To Astonish finished. And, well, obviously the Ant-Man run, Giant Man run. But you got the Invincible Iron Man. And this is number 44, The Astonishing Ant-Man. This was 6 months before the Marvel feature stories. I just don't know why they suddenly interested. This was Ross Andrew. Very good little story, but just unusual one to put in just suddenly a backup in Iron Man. Very odd. Don't know why, but still, some of the very unusual storyline as well. Also, you've got the Scarlet Beetle, which you have to say is one of the oddest villains as well. But you lost your radiation-spawned powers years ago, apparently. It says here, Tales To Astonish number 39. So they even had to put a little reminder so the fans would sort of know the storyline, where it comes from. But then we get Marvel feature. And I've never bought any of these ones. So you got the Astonishing Ant-Man. It's a pity that poor old Wasp, who turns up in lots of the stories, doesn't get mentioned. Ant-Man and the Wasp, why not? Alone, trapped, helpless, in a world too big for him. So in a way, they did try to go with these sort of stories where he was obviously small for a bit more of the storyline. But it would have been nice if they'd gone for an atom level. I don't know why they didn't do it sort of like the Harlan Ellison one, where where the Hulk shrinks and sort of meets Dorella and those sort of things. Why didn't they do that sort of story? But still, you got that one. Mike Friedrich, Herb Trimpe, my favourite, Herb Trimpe. But also, you got Peter Parker in this as well, which is unusual. But I guess they thought, well, put Peter Parker in there, Spider-Man. Maybe those Spider-Man fans would go, ooh, Spidey. Go off and read this book and then maybe stick with it. Maybe that was the idea. I don't think it worked because it didn't last very long. But you had those characters again, good old Egghead. I always liked the covers. The covers were quite unusual. Now, there was always something about these Marvel feature ones that always had that sort of unusual look. It went for that sort of seven. Maybe because I just started really reading the comics at that time, that those covers looked really odd to me. Even now they look slightly strange compared with the other comics. But again, got lots of stories again with the Wasp, and I thought really decent little tales. This one's a really unusual one. Yeah, got there the Wasp looking slightly different from usual. And very similar to a Hulk story, I think. There was when I looked at this, I thought, oh, it's like the Harpy story from the Hulk, but in the origin again. The origin of the Wasp. Then you got some, this one's very unusual. And that's another thing. Again, it was suffering in the early Tales To Astonish. You had some really naff villains. And then this guy, I think his name was, I can't even, Dr. Nemesis. You really, when you get that sort of thing, Dr. Nemesis or Paraman. And even but still, Black Goliath. We're on to the Black Goliath stories. Obviously, Marvel features, that finished. Issue 10, number 11 was the 2-in-1 Hulk and the Thing story. Now, that's not included. But you've got here Luke Cage and Power Man with Black Goliath, and you've got the Ringmaster and the Circus of Crime. they always turn up everywhere. I don't know if they're still going. I assume they still are. I don't know about their audiences at that point. But still, you had those stories. Black Goliath, unfortunately, that didn't really run very long. It didn't have a great run. Well, actually, looking through these, some of these stories were quite good. And, well, I think more deserving than 5 comics. But still, Black Goliath, I think, again, another thing it really suffered from was the villains. I think probably, again, that's always a bit of a problem if you haven't got any really great villains. You need to establish some sort of like the villain you're going to see maybe on a regular basis. The Doctor Doom of your character, Dr. Octopus. It needs that sort of thing, I think. Sometimes, obviously, you had Loki with Thor, but Black Goliath didn't really feel that. Still, it did include another set of stories that's very unusual, the Champions. Now, I love these ones. Of course, Champions you can get in the Champions Complete Collection, and that's a really, really good set of books. I really love those. And Black Goliath story here continues on there. Of course, you can see Hercules, Iceman. Now, Ghost Rider, for some weird reason, isn't in the picture. I don't know what happened to him before that. But you got all the way through the story, and then to the end, and then the story changes. Because then we've got Marvel Premiere, The Astonishing Ant-Man, and that's obviously the cover. They've now got in here, all new. And of course, John Byrne and Bob Layton. Really nice story. Scott Lang completely changes the story with, and of course, still Hank Pym does turn up in it, so you got, but now, of course, he's Yellow Jacket. And then we've got some extras. The extras are great. You've got a lovely little bonus one there, Madame Macabre, whatever her name is, Madame Macabre. And, let's go that one the other way. Also, there's a really nice one here, which, pencil drawing. You don't see many pencils. I don't know why. Obviously, they've been inked over the years, but it's nice that when you get these occasional ones. And this one wasn't used at all. So you got this. Apparently, it was by Dick Rockwell, who was a nephew of Norman Rockwell. It actually looked a perfectly reasonable story. Apparently, it was redone by Ditko, and I must admit, Astonishing 61 was not one of my favourite of Ditko's. It just really wasn't the world's greatest. So it's just odd. I don't know. Maybe the rest of it wasn't. Let's have a look. 61. That one's. Well, they did quite often. They had Giant Man had a fan club. They quite often, occasionally, the fan club would turn up. They'd suddenly go into his house and they'd sort of like be asking questions about him. But now walks. Oh, here it is. Now walks the android. So you've got that. You can see what happened. You've got the Wasp there. You've got Giant Man doing his exercise. But if you go back to this one, let's just go back here. You've got all the fan club there. All just looking, and obviously he's slightly showing off there. He can actually hold his weight on 2 fingers. It's pretty impressive. That quite a really good bit of balance there. I don't think I could do that in a million years. Also, you've got here an unused cover for the Marvel Premiere as well, number 48. So you've got a lovely one there, and that's really nice. And also, Layton illustrated second take on the Marvel Premiere 48 cover as well. So that's included. And also a Black Goliath one as well, number 3, original cover. So that's the Ant-Man Giant Man collection. One of the more, I think, interesting epic collections in recent years. There's quite a lot of the epic collections, just continue on all the stories. It's Daredevil one, Daredevil, another Daredevil. So this one is a slightly more quirky, unusual Ant-Man and Giant Man. So this one is very, very recommended, along, of course, with this one. I loved it. Really, really good books, and totally recommended Epic Collection Volume 2.